In many cases, Hollywood deliberately hid a star's youth to fit the part or an image. The result was that fans believed these actors had lived much longer lives than they actually had. Here are 19 vintage actors whose real ages were far younger than audiences ever guessed. Linda Darnell. Linda Darnell was known for playing tough, streetwise women in 1940s film noirs. In Otto Preminger's Fallen Angel in 1945, she portrays Stella, a cynical waitress with a shady past. Stella comes across as world-weary and world-wise, and audiences assumed the actress behind her was a mature woman. In reality, Darnell was just 21 years old when filming began. The popular film site FilmSite even notes in its plot summary, Stella 21-year-old Linda Darnell had been missing for 3 days, highlighting that the actress was barely past her teen years in the role. Darnell's sultry look, dark hair, and confident swagger convinced viewers they were watching a seasoned survivor, not a spring chicken. She married at age 19, which also helped sell the idea that she was in her mid-20s. In short, Darnell's very first leading roles were played in her early 20s, but thanks to her fiery persona and studio styling, the public assumed she was much older. Linda Darnell's mature image was no accident. It was carefully sculpted by 20th Century Fox. Studio head Darryl Zanuck reportedly wanted her to embody grown woman sensuality, even when she was barely old enough to drink. Before Fallen Angel, she had already been typecast as the alluring temptress in Blood and Sand and Hangover Square. Critics often remarked on her experienced eyes and old soul expression, unaware that she was barely out of her teens. Behind the scenes, Darnell was still struggling with insecurity and studio pressure to appear older. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor's Hollywood journey is remarkable for the way a child could seem decades older than she actually was. Born in London in 1932, she was barely 8 years old when she first caught the eye of casting directors. Her violet eyes, precise posture, and striking bone structure gave her a maturity that belied her years. So unusual was her presence that one Universal Studios casting director bluntly told her mother, "She doesn't have the face of a child." By age 9, she was dropped from Universal for that very reason. Brynner seemed too grown up for the child roles available at the time. Yet, what might have been a setback only helped forge her Hollywood legend. By the time she starred in Lassie Come Home, 1943, at the age of 12, Taylor had already mastered the art of carrying herself with poise and grace, giving performances far beyond what audiences expected of someone still in elementary school. MGM, recognizing the commercial value of her unique presence, avoided advertising her true age, allowing the public to assume she was a young teenager rather than a preteen prodigy. Newspaper features and studio press kits emphasized her talent and sophistication rather than her youth, contributing to the widespread impression that she was older. Even in her earliest interviews, Taylor's confidence and articulate speech made her appear years beyond her age, a trait that would define her career. Biographers have noted that she carried the seriousness and composure of someone who had grown up under the intense scrutiny and pressures of studio life. Her early experience as a grown-up child became a hallmark of her screen presence, giving films like National Velvet 1944 an emotional depth that astonished audiences. Elizabeth Taylor was, in every sense, a child whose talent, beauty, and maturity convinced the world she had lived far longer than she had. Orson Welles. When Citizen Kane premiered in 1941, audiences were confronted with cinematic tour de force that seemed the work of a seasoned veteran, but its creator, Orson Welles, was just 25 years old. Welles arrived in Hollywood with a reputation already forged in radio and theater, having dominated the Broadway stage with his Mercury Theater productions. His booming, gravelly voice, commanding presence, and intense gaze conveyed the wisdom of someone far beyond his years. Critics and viewers alike assumed they were witnessing the work of a man decades older, unaware that he was still in his mid-20s. Welles's youth was further obscured by his mastery of technique and timing. He demanded precise camera movements, orchestrated complex lighting schemes, and guided actors with an authority that few thought possible from someone so young. Even his contemporaries were taken aback. Seasoned actors like Joseph Cotten and Agnes Moorehead, who worked closely with him, often assumed he had spent decades honing his craft, only to discover he was barely older than a college graduate. The American Film Institute notes Orson Welles was just 25 years old during Citizen Kane, a fact that continues to astonish historians and film enthusiasts alike. His physical appearance also contributed to the illusion. Welles's heavy-lidded eyes, deep voice, and confident stride suggested gravitas. His casual charm masked the intensity and creative genius behind his youthful face. Beyond Citizen Kane, Welles continued to play roles that seemed far older than he was, including Macbeth at 26 and Falstaff in Chimes at Midnight at 30. Off-screen, his intelligence, eloquence, and larger-than-life personality reinforced the perception of an elder statesman of cinema. In retrospect, Welles's early Hollywood triumphs reveal a paradox. The towering intellect and authority that defined his career were fully present in a man still in his 20s, making his accomplishments all the more extraordinary. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr's early career is a striking example of a Hollywood myth, that some actors simply seem older than they are. Born Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler in Vienna in 1914, Lamarr debuted in the Czech film Ecstasy, 1933, a daring work that included one of the first cinematic depictions of female pleasure and a brief nude swimming scene. Audiences were captivated, yet few knew that she was only 17 at the time. Her natural poise, classical beauty, and unflinching confidence convinced viewers that they were watching a fully grown woman, a rare feat for someone barely out of adolescence. When Lamarr moved to Hollywood at around 18, studios were quick to leverage her European sophistication. Her accent, statuesque figure, and perfectly groomed features created an aura of worldly glamour. Studio publicity often emphasized her elegance and intrigue while carefully obscuring her youth, making her appear older than she was. Critics and fans alike assumed Lamarr had decades of life experience, when in reality she was navigating fame and scandal still in her teens. Beyond her appearance, her composure in interviews and on set reinforced this illusion. She spoke with the assurance of a veteran actress and carried herself with the kind of poise many could only achieve in mid-adulthood. Lamarr's story reveals the dual pressures of early fame. She was thrust into adult roles and adult scrutiny before her own adulthood had fully begun. Yet her ability to project a mature, seductive presence at 17 makes her one of cinema's most enduring examples of youthful actors embodying a sophistication far beyond their years. Her early stardom foreshadowed a Hollywood career built on the tension between innocence and experience, forever cementing her as a timeless, enigmatic beauty. Lauren Bacall. Lauren Bacall's first appearance on screen is the stuff of legend. Born Betty Joan Persky in 1924, she made her cinematic debut in To Have and Have Not, 1944, opposite Humphrey Bogart at just 19 years old. Yet from the moment she sashayed into the frame, audiences assumed they were witnessing a woman far older and more experienced. Her low, sultry voice, smoky gaze, and poised physicality gave the impression of a seasoned jazz singer, a worldly woman with decades behind her. Lines like, "You know how to whistle, don't you?" delivered with teasing confidence, convinced the public she had lived a life of sophisticated adventures, when in fact, Bacall had only recently graduated high school. The illusion was carefully enhanced by Hollywood's styling and makeup teams. Her high cheekbones, strong brows, and tailored wardrobe were designed to project maturity and allure. Press releases and studio photographs avoided referencing her youth, presenting her instead as an iconic, almost ageless figure. Fans inundated her with mail intended for women well into their 20s, marveling at her apparent sophistication. Bacall herself later recounted the bewilderment of being treated as an adult star while still navigating adolescence. Beyond the superficial glamour, Bacall's talent and instinctual screen presence elevated her beyond mere looks. She commanded the frame with confidence, matching the seasoned Bogart scene for scene, and her understated charisma sold the illusion of life experience. In hindsight, it is remarkable that a 19-year-old could embody such depth and poise. Lauren Bacall's debut remains one of Hollywood's most striking examples of a teenager convincingly playing a worldly, self-assured woman, setting the stage for a legendary career defined by elegance, wit, and timeless allure. Bette Davis. Bette Davis's early career is a study in contradiction, a young woman with the intensity, authority, and gravitas of someone decades her senior. Born in 1908, Davis began taking on challenging roles in the 1930s that required emotional weight far beyond her years. In Of Human Bondage, 1934, she was only 26, yet critics noted her piercing eyes, steely expressions, and commanding presence, all of which suggested the wisdom and experience of a seasoned actress. This reputation only deepened in Jezebel 1938, where her portrayal of a headstrong Southern belle seemed to come from a life fully lived, despite her being about 30 at the time. By the time she starred in Dark Victory 1939, playing a terminally ill socialite, Davis was roughly 31, but the character's fraught sophistication, heightened by luxurious period costumes and aristocratic bearing, gave the impression of a woman much older. Audiences assumed they were witnessing a mature star. Few realized they were watching a young actress just beginning to command Hollywood's elite stages. Davis herself disliked questions about her age, understanding that revealing it might shatter the carefully cultivated persona that made her performances so convincing. Her early success lay in her uncanny ability to channel complex, world-weary characters while still in her 20s and early 30s. Makeup, wardrobe, and lighting amplified her intensity, projecting an aura of experience and resilience. In effect, Davis's age became irrelevant next to the overwhelming realism and authority she brought to her roles. The public was captivated, believing in the character first and the actress second. Bette Davis's legacy demonstrates that a performer's skill and presence can convincingly age a young actor, and that, in classic Hollywood, talent and poise often trumped the calendar. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn's early career illustrates the magic of screen presence, the ability to project maturity far beyond one's actual years. Born in 1929, Hepburn was only 24 when she starred in Roman Holiday, 1953. Yet she exuded the elegance, composure, and sophistication of a woman seemingly much older. As the runaway Princess Anna, she balanced vulnerability with poise, creating a sense of experience and wisdom that audiences assumed came from decades of life experience. A 1953 Life magazine photo essay even highlighted her age, noting her as a 24-year-old waif, yet viewers consistently misjudged her as older. Hepburn's refined British accent, graceful movements, and meticulous styling contributed to the perception of timeless maturity. Even her dresses, hair, and makeup were chosen to accentuate elegance rather than youthfulness, making her appear as though she had always belonged to high society or the cultured European elite. When she won the Academy Award for Roman Holiday, journalists praised her old Hollywood grace and subtle charm, never emphasizing that she was barely into her 20s. Hepburn herself cultivated a sense of mystique around her age, occasionally deflecting questions to maintain an aura of enigma. Her subsequent roles, including Sabrina 1954, reinforced this paradox: a young actress consistently cast as composed, worldly women or romantic heroines. By projecting sophistication, intelligence, and gentleness, Hepburn convinced audiences that she had years of experience navigating the world, even as she was still discovering it herself. In short, Audrey Hepburn's early filmography exemplifies the rare ability of youth to convey maturity, making her one of the most iconic examples in Hollywood history of talent outpacing age. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman's serene beauty and modesty always gave her an ageless quality. When she first became famous in Casablanca, 1942, she was just 27 years old. A classic fashion blog notes, Ingrid Bergman was 27 years old when she played the character Ilse Lund in Casablanca. Yet Bergman's gentle Swedish accent and poised demeanor didn't broadcast that fact. She simply seemed like timeless cinema royalty. By the time of Gaslight 1944, Bergman was 29, playing a woman tormented by her husband, again showing deep maturity. In her own life, she appeared reserved and sophisticated, so it fit the image that she was often thought of as grown up. In truth, nowhere did people realize that Hollywood's golden girl was barely in her 20s at the start of these classics. Bergman's case shows that a serene, almost shy screen presence can easily mask youth. Her hushed, elegant acting style prevented anyone from guessing how young she really was on screen. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur's career is a fun reversal. She was actually older than she appeared. Born in 1900, she was nearly 40 by the time she starred opposite Jimmy Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939. Audiences, however, remembered her as a perky girl next door, never guessing she was 39 during that film. Arthur's petite frame, high-pitched giggle, and fresh-faced makeup gave her a youthful look. Even as late as 1939, the studio touted her gamine charm, so nobody expected middle age. The life story of Jean Arthur even notes her birth in 1900. In short, viewers assumed Jean was years younger than she was, simply because she looked so spirited and young on camera. Her character roles, always sweet, witty heroines, reinforced the idea of an ingenue far from 40. This is a reminder that sometimes the audience underestimates a star's age because of style. Jean's youthful appearance hid the fact that she'd been making movies for more than a decade. Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner is forever remembered as the shaved-headed King Mongkut of The King and I. When he first appeared in that role on Broadway in 1951, he was about 30 and clean-shaven. He kept shaving his head afterward, and by the time the film version was shot in 1956, he was 36. His bald, bearded image became so iconic that fans assumed he was an older Eastern dignitary or monk. In reality, Brynner was born in 1920, making him only 36 during the movie, but his perpetual bald head and regal costume hid his youth. When he first came to America, he often played exotic villains who required a menacing maturity. Those roles, combined with the eerie shaved head and intense gaze he adopted, convinced everyone he'd been through the school of hard knocks. Even his own relatives reportedly didn't know his true age until much later. Thus, Brynner's imposing presence made people think the king was decades older, even though he spent most of his career in his 30s. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn combined youthful energy with a worldly wit that often threw people off her actual age. Born in 1907, Hepburn was in her early 30s during her early hits. For example, in the comedy Holiday 1938, she was 31, and in the Philadelphia Story, 1940, she was 33. Yet her sharp intelligence, aristocratic poise, and fearless personality often made audiences picture someone older. In Holiday, she famously talks her way out of marriage. The urbane confidence of that scene suggested a woman who's had time to gain life experience. Hepburn's Oscar-winning comeback, The Philadelphia Story, 1940 likewise featured her as a sophisticated New York socialite. Few realized she was just 33. Her stage-trained voice, crisp fashion sense, and no-nonsense attitude all contributed to an old soul vibe. It's no surprise that many fans in the 1940s assumed Hepburn was in her mid-30s or even 40, when in fact she was in her late 20s and early 30s. In short, even though Kate was relatively young, her spirited and smart characters made her seem like she had lived a lot more life. Gene Tierney. Gene Tierney was a striking blonde, often cast as sultry villains or romantic leads in Leave Her to Heaven. 1945, she plays a scheming wife whose obsession turns deadly. Tierney looks every bit the confident, manipulative adult in that movie, yet she was only 25 at the time. She was born in 1920. By then, she had already performed on Broadway, but on film, she radiated mature beauty. When audiences saw her icy glare and world-weary poise, they assumed she was closer to 30. The studio didn't emphasize her real age. Without an official clue, viewers simply lumped Tierney in with other glamorous ladies of the 40s who typically were in their late 20s. In reality, Tierney didn't become a mature woman movie heroine until well after she was actually an adult. One could hardly guess she was barely out of her teens. Laurence Harvey. Laurence Harvey often played intense, world-weary characters in the 1950s. Born in 1928, he rose to fame with films like Room at the Top, 1959, and The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. In Manchurian Candidate, he played a war veteran with a haunting calm, and he was only 34. But Harvey's deep voice, trimmed beard, and solemn expression made him seem older. Throughout his career, he carried himself with a moody reserve. Earlier war dramas and thrillers cast him as tough guys or professors under stress, roles that call for an air of experience. Because he rarely cracked jokes in interviews and often looked thoughtful, viewers just assumed he was pushing 40. In truth, those heavy roles were being played by a man in his early 30s. Once people realized Harvey was born in 1928, they were surprised how much maturity he had packed into so few years. Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd was a short, quiet leading man known for hard-boiled heroes. He was born in 1913. By the time he made his breakthrough film, This Gun for Hire, 1942, he was around 28 to 29 years old, but he looked and sounded older. In real life, Ladd was already balding in his late 20s, and he spoke in a gravelly baritone that belied his youth. Biographical notes mention he was balding and had a deep voice quite young, and that he even lied about his age early in his career to seem older. Studios capitalized on this. Ladd frequently appeared in publicity photos wearing a fedora or cowboy hat, which gave him a grizzled cowboy vibe. So when audiences saw Shane, 1953, and The Blue Dahlia, 1946, they met what looked like a veteran gunslinger. In fact, Ladd was only 27 when he first played a hit man in This Gun for Hire. Most fans had no idea that this world-weary, man-alone hero was barely 30. Ginger Rogers. Ginger Rogers is best known for her roles with Fred Astaire, but in her first big parts, she often seemed way older. She was born in 1911, which made her 22 during Flying Down to Rio 1933, the film that launched her RKO career. Yet Rogers played sophisticated, worldly women who smoked cigarettes with class and held their own on luxury cruise ships in the 1930s, musicals. Audiences naturally assumed Ginger was an older starlet. In reality, she started performing on Broadway in her teens, so by the time she dazzled Hollywood, she was still barely out of her teens. Rogers's vivacious smile and screen confidence sold her as someone who'd seen life, even though she was often only 20 or 22 at the time. Publicity sometimes even fudged her birth date to keep the mystery. For decades, people looked at Ginger and assumed she was older, never guessing her true age during those early fame days. Clark Gable. Clark the King. Gable had a famously mature screen presence, which masked the fact that he wasn't that old. Born in 1901, Gable was in his early 30s. During the mid-1930s, for example, he was about 33 in It Happened One Night, 1934. But Gable's burly build, square jaw, and signature mustache made him look like a weathered man. He brought a husky drawl and world-weariness to roles, whether as a reporter or outlaw. Even people who met him were surprised to learn his age because he exuded the confidence of a seasoned veteran. In publicity shots, he often played cowboys or tough city guys, and he sometimes claimed an older age to fit the part. As one biography notes, Gable's first big break came in his early 30s, yet nobody thought of him as young. They saw a grizzled leading man. In short, when Clark Gable stormed movie screens, audiences thought they were watching a man well into midlife, not a strong young adult. James Dean. James Dean is immortalized as the epitome of youth and angst, but even he created an illusion of older suffering. In Rebel Without a Cause, 1955, Dean's haunted gaze and world-weary posture make him seem like a teenager who's already been through hell. He was actually only 24 at the time. His quiet smirk and the cigarette dangling from his lips implied a tough history. Co-stars and crew later said Dean seemed old inside. Even studio publicity leaned into the image of Dean as a troubled young man carrying the weight of the world. But behind the scenes, he was barely past college age. Tragically, Dean's untimely death at age 24 froze this older-than-his-years image in the public mind. Only after his death did people look back and say, wait, he was just a kid. Akim Tamiroff. Character actor Akim Tamiroff often played worldly types, so audiences might assume he was even older than he actually was. Tamiroff was born in 1899, making him 40 in 1939 and 44 when he played a crafty beggar in The Great McGinty, 1940. His thick Armenian accent and formidable presence gave him the vibe of a man with a lifetime of experience. It's true, Tamiroff started his Hollywood career relatively late in his 30s and never looked like a dashing youth. But interestingly, he continued playing older characters even into his 70s, so people always underestimated his age on the younger end. In some ways, Tamiroff's example shows the reverse pattern. His strongly typed image and age-defying roles meant moviegoers had no clue he was actually much younger when he first appeared in many films. Whether he was a grizzled gangster or a wise nobleman, Tamiroff consistently brought age and gravitas to the screen, making it easy to forget he started in Hollywood as a man just past middle age. Cary Grant. Cary Grant charmed audiences as the smooth, witty, romantic lead, a persona that often made him seem older than he was. Born in 1904, Grant was only in his early 30s when he became a top Hollywood star in the mid-1930s. For instance, in Bringing Up Baby, 1938, and The Philadelphia Story. 1940, he was 34 and 36, respectively. Yet his elegant tuxedos, impeccable manners, and self-confident banter gave him the air of a worldly playboy well beyond his years. The studios promoted his debonair style, and his clipped, refined accent suggested a life spent in high society. In short, Cary Grant's effortless suaveness led audiences to picture him as a seasoned sophisticate. So many assumed he was at least a decade older. Only later biographies revealed that this ageless icon of romance was a young man in his prime. Each of these stars reminds us that Hollywood's golden illusions were built as much on smoke and mirrors as on talent. Camera angles, makeup, and wardrobe, plus an actor's own gravitas, could inflate a young person's aura of age. Until the true birthdays came to light in later decades, fans simply accepted their favorite stars as older, wiser figures. Today, it's fun to dig up these facts. The legends live on, and so do their surprising real ages documented by film historians. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below for more Hollywood secrets.